I will pass out if you are a notes person. You know what? Would you mind doing that for me? Thank you. Those are just the main points, and you can fill in where you would like to fill in. Little bit about me. So you're at my presentation. I feel like it's probably good that you know just a little bit of my history, so you know who's talking to you. It's always good to know who's talking to you. Don't talk to strangers, okay? So my name's Aaron Fullan. My family's in here currently. They might leave if they run out of Skittles or something. But my wife, Tabitha, in the hat, the only one in a hat. So yep, there's Tabby. And my 4 children, Bella, Quinn, Claire, and Barrick. We are from Iowa. I was born and raised in Iowa. That's right near the middle of our nation. Okay, we produce a lot of corn, a lot of pigs. I don't actually know if this stat is true, but supposedly there are more hogs in Iowa than people. So that's a fun fact. But it also, at one point in time, was the most literate state in all 50 states. So we know how to read and write. There's just more pigs than people. I was born and raised in Clinton, Iowa, which is right on the eastern nose of Iowa. And that is now where we currently live. So full circle moment here. I am a film composer. I am an actor, and I also, they call it social media influencer. I don't really love the word, but that is some of what I do. Create a lot of comedic content online. So that's kind of my trifecta, I always say. If people are like, well, can you narrow down what you do? Those are the 3 things that I'm actively pursuing in the industry. Little history of my life pursuing art. Obviously, this presentation is about how my child is interested in the arts. So I have what my parents, my experience is how they handled my desire to be in the arts. So from very early on, I knew I wanted to do something in the realm of entertainment. I got my start so I have 2 older brothers. We would set up a camcorder in the corner of our basement. I can still see exactly where it was. We didn't have a tripod even. We just set it on the shelf where all our VHS tapes were, and the big massive ones that report at crime scenes and stuff like that. Those ones. And we would set it up in the corner and play pretend. And we did all sorts of, we tried to recreate Lord of the Rings, which was a little bit ambitious for us. We did Three Stooges stuff. We were just crazy and figured out how to use a camera, how to act, how to make people laugh. So that was my earliest start. But then in music, I took piano lessons from the age of 8 on, 2nd grade, and then took piano lessons all through college as well. So in college, I had a double major in Bible exposition and theology and music ministry with an emphasis on piano performance. So that was my musical side. And my parents just kind of recognized early on that this was going to be a path, specifically for me. My other brothers did not end up pursuing a career in entertainment, but early on nurtured what they saw as natural talent, not without hesitation. So currently, I am a parent as well of young children, and I just want you to know I get it. So first things first here. Well, I already did a little bit about me. Now you know a little bit about me. First things first, parents, don't panic, okay? Fill in the blank, it's on your worksheet. Don't panic. Did you already know?
Well, I already did that.
Oh.
That's check.
Done, all right. If you've already panicked, you can stop panicking. Why? Because art is not a worthless pursuit. Okay, so that is, I think, one of the very, very base level things we need to understand as parents, that God is the ultimate artist. Okay, he originated art, and all of creation is a form of art. So when we look at the first 7 days of, all that we see being created in that amount of time, those 7 days were just filled with creativity and art by the one who came up with the idea of art. Beauty enhances our lives in every way. It's typically not high on a priority list when we think about it, but when you walk into a church or you walk into even a coffee shop, the aesthetics, the paint colors, the decor, all of that, whether we're acknowledging it or not, does affect our experience. And that is true in all realms of art. You look at films or music or writing, these various forms of art. If we looked at our lives, you'd recognize how much our lives are enhanced by art. Some examples from Scripture. Exodus 31, verses 1 through 11. Two artists. I'm going to try and pronounce his name. Bezalel and Oholiab are charged with the artistic needs of the tabernacle. So when God decided he wants to come and tabernacle with his people, he wants his presence to be with his creation, what did he do? He charged artists to create the tabernacle where he was going to dwell. So is art important to the Lord? Absolutely. Another example in 1 Kings 7:13 through 14, Huram, another artist, was made responsible for the bronze works of the temple, God's updated dwelling place, so to speak. Come on in, guys. You're welcome here. Okay? Got it. I would be doing that too if I was not speaking here. So thank you for popping in. Okay, so Isaiah 64:8, we have the artistic comparison of God as the potter, we are the clay. That imagery of art. Once again, the Bible is infused with examples of art, and we need to be mindful of that. When we're dealing with children, our own children, or even if you are in here as a child interested in the arts, recognize that it's everywhere in Scripture. Art can be an act of worship. Creators pointing to the creator of it all. And we just have to be careful to separate art. This is my big thing. You separate art from the abuses of art. Okay, and that's hard for us sometimes to separate because we've seen so many abuses of what art can be. Art itself in its various forms are not sinful. They're not wrong. It's merely a tool, and it can be used just like any tool, either for good or for evil. Okay? I think it's important when we have kids, this wasn't I'll give my own parents' perspective on this throughout this presentation, but it's important to acknowledge that when we put other occupations that we desire for our children higher on the spectrum than what they feel naturally called to do, what that communicates. It's a dangerous place to be as a parent to say, you know what, you're better off being a lawyer, you're better off being a doctor, a tradesman, a plumber, a teacher. Those are great occupations, but if your child was gifted by God for such a time as this to create some sort of art and tell stories for him, we as parents do not want to be the ones responsible for pushing them off that path. God inspires artists to create for him and for his glory. We don't want to imply that a life lived creating art is a life with no inherent value. A couple examples of Christian artists throughout history. I'm just going to, for the sake of time, focus on two. Does anybody know who these two are just by the sketches of them? This guy? Anybody? Thank you, Justin. You can see me after class. No, this is Handel, George Frederick Handel, and that over there is Johann Sebastian Bach. I'm focusing on musicians because I'm a little partial to musicians. I studied music history in college. That was one of my absolute favorite courses. Couldn't believe how many composers that we listen to. You go to a symphony, you hear all these great composers, Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven. Their lives, horrible existences. And I remember just reading story after story of all these people that I had admired as a kid and being like, what in the world? Most of the art that came out of their being was out of pain and out of loss and out of struggle with addictions. And so I just saw a lot of my heroes just crumbling before me as I studied music history. But there's a few examples, not perfect human beings by any means, but there are some wonderful examples of artists throughout history that did great things. Bach, Handel, Mendelssohn is another one. They had imperfect lives, but they were devoted to creating music for the glory of God. Johann Sebastian Bach, I would say specifically, was one of the composers who just had laser focus on why he was creating music. I'm going to read a few quotes here because this to me is mind-boggling. He was in the Baroque period, so very early on in what we would probably say is like modern classical music. Middle Ages happened, then he started writing music in the 1600s. So all of the bulwarks of music composers who came later all looked to Bach as like the epitome of greatness. And he is one of the few composers who had a relatively stable life and was completely sold out for the Lord, which I think is very telling. You commit your ways to the Lord, you commit your art to the Lord, and he can do great things through you. And at the end of all of his pieces of works, he had SDG, which is Soli Deo Gloria. Everything he did was focused on, I'm doing this for the glory of the Lord. Anyone who plays my piece, a violinist, finishes my piece, they see SDG. They were focused. He knew what he was writing music for. Mozart said, now there is music from which a man can learn something after listening to Bach. And Mozart was a child prodigy writing music at the age of 3. Beethoven, another great, said he should be called not Bach, which means brook, but Meer, which means sea, on account of his endlessly inexhaustible wealth of musical ideas. Schumann says music owes as much to Bach as religion to its founder. Brahms, Bach is God is God. Chopin said Bach is like an astronomer who with the help of ciphers finds the most wonderful stars. Aaron Copland, who was a modern American composer in the past 100 years, said if one were asked to name one musician who came closest to composing without human flaw, I suppose general consensus would choose Johann Sebastian Bach. Committing your art to the Lord. Amazing. Handel, he was an interesting fellow. When he wrote The Messiah, he was in a place of turmoil in his life. Had gambling problems, was not great with money. The type of music he was writing was going out of style in England. And so he was just getting ready to leave England because nothing was working, nothing was clicking for him. And then the text of Handel's Messiah was given to him by a believer, Charles Jennens. And Charles was basically like, here's a text. I'd really like you to write music if you have time to do this. And he did. He wrote it in 24 days, which is like 3.5 hours of music, give or take. Crazy. Very limited eating and sleeping. Artists are crazy. We self-admittedly are a little bit wacky. But didn't leave his house. Food was brought to his room. He was just all in doing this score. music historians look at the original manuscripts of Handel's Messiah, and for the 259 pages of score, they said it's probably one of the most remarkably low error scores they've ever seen. It's very common to have to edit after writing, and he had very, very few. One time he was being brought food, he had tears in his eyes, and he was quoted as saying, "I did think I did see all heaven before me, and the great God himself seated on his throne with his company of angels," while writing the Hallelujah chorus. That was his experience. Premiered in Dublin in 1742, huge success. Overall, wasn't a huge success for many, many years, though. And legend has it that King George, when he first heard it, the King of England at the time, rose up when the Hallelujah chorus started. And obviously, if the king stands, you all stand. So everyone stood up with him. And as history would have it, that's still the way people do it. I know if you see a performance of the Hallelujah chorus, everyone stands up. So those kind of examples of how can you underestimate the power of what Handel wrote, what Johann Sebastian Bach wrote, and the testament of the legacy they have left behind. Would we dare say examples like that were wasted lives? Writing music that has lasted for centuries, that is completely devoted to the glory of God. I would hope not. Power of stories, okay? Transitioning into filmmaking. I don't know where all of you are with your kids being interested in what form of art. Christ told stories, okay? You can't really refute the power of story. It was Christ's preferred method of conveying eternal truths, period. Why? Because we're all living part of a story, for one thing, and we all relate to stories. It is universal. We love stories. Creation, fall, redemption. We're all part of that story arc, and all great movies have that story arc in some way, shape, or form. So much of what we see on screen is reflected in the grand scheme of our existence. Classic fairy tales, same thing. You have, a beautiful thing, a beautiful land. There's a curse. There's a spell. There's something that wrecks what was great. And then at the end, it's redeemed. It's a beautiful thing. We resonate with these eternal truths. And I will be honest here for a moment. Some secular films convey a more powerful redemption story than, quote unquote, faith-based films. Just in the way that they are able to create that story arc, which should not be the case. I'll just put it that way. And I would say, which I'm going to talk a little bit about Hollywood history here in a moment, made massive inroads in the past decade in that regard. Quality, just script writing, everything has enhanced in the past decade, and which I think is a massive answer to prayer. But if we eliminate storytelling, if we think, well, it's just a waste, it's cinema is just entertainment, it's amusement, it's not thinking, it's pure cotton candy. If we really embrace that, the ripple effect would not only be depressing, it's downright dangerous. Stories of the past, it's history. We need to know our history. Storytelling is essential to this, not only enjoyment of life, but also for progressing into the future better than we were in the past. I'll just start right into history of Hollywood, okay? I am a self-confessed Hollywood history nerd, okay? I self-professed, not confessed. It's professed. Yeah. Whether we like it or not, film and visual media is king when it comes to modern storytelling. That is, everyone recognizes that. Every era has had its heyday. Stage theater used to be the top dog. Now it's film. So as believers who maybe have children who are interested in the arts, we need to understand what is Hollywood, not just the city itself, but the entertainment industry. Where did it come from? Why is it the way it is today? And why is it different? So just a brief history on that. I think it's fascinating. Hollywood was originally a plot of land that was purchased by a couple in the 1800s. And they hoped, when they first bought the plot of land, that it would be like a Christian paradise, that it would be some sort of, I'll just put it this way, they banned alcohol, gambling, pool halls, bowling alleys, oil wells, glue factories, bicycle riding on sidewalks, speeding by car, and movie theaters. So they had this visual of what they wanted this community to be. They were giving away land to anybody who would agree to build a church on their property. So they were so excited that this would be a vice-free Christian community. Hollywood, the same place that we know what it is today. Then in 1905, it was acquired by Los Angeles due to a water shortage. They did not want to be annexed by Los Angeles, but you need water. Okay, so if you need water, you do what's necessary. But that was in the early 1900s. In 1905, the Los Angeles Times described Hollywood as a place where the saloon and its kindred evils are unknown. So you can see there's been a change, a big change. Christianity had an early and strong influence in the entertainment industry. So when I'm saying Hollywood, I'm using that as a broad spectrum. Well, what I just talked about, the town of Hollywood, but from here on out, Hollywood is a general term for the entertainment industry, okay? In the first century of filmmaking, so late 1800s into 1980s, over 100 films were made about the life of Christ, which is about one per year. You see the math I did there? It's pretty impressive. Christianity was deeply ingrained into Western culture at that time when cinema and all of those things, those arts were starting to sprout in America. People of faith were well represented in Hollywood, not just Christians. Most of the early studio moguls were Jewish and had Jewish roots. And Catholicism had a strong influence on the early production of films as well. And most of the filmmakers, directors, producers had faith roots of some sort. That is not what it is today. The 30s introduced more provocative material than had been in place before. So the faith community, when they started seeing what was happening on screen, they transferred from producing film to censoring. And so they kind of really shifted their focus from, okay, we're making movies, now we're seeing what kind of movies are being made. We don't want to create that kind of movie. We want to help it stay a family-friendly experience. So they started the Hays Commission, which was a moral code that studios agreed to adhere to. We also had the Catholics formed the Legion of Decency. And again, because studios knew who their audience was, and they knew if we stop making content that appeals to this large base, we're going to lose money. So you had all the major studio heads saying, yes, we agree, we'll sign this, we'll stick to these standards, which you had that until the late 40s, then or mid 40s. You had all of our GIs coming home from World War II with foreign influence and seeing what Europe was making. Europe was way more, what do you want to say, risque in what they allowed on their cinemas and things like that. So all of a sudden we had that influx of people coming back to our nation and introducing new ideas, introducing new ways to make film. And eventually, Christians in the late 40s, early 50s, again, I'm using this as a general term, not everybody, but pretty much withdrew their presence from Hollywood. That was their response. Things are getting too bad. They're getting out of control. We need to clear out. And all of a sudden, cinemas were evil. Acting as a general practice was evil. And all of a sudden, you had parents who were part of this move. I would say my grandparents' generation saw what was happening. And when they had kids coming up who showed interest, it was hard to encourage that because of what they were seeing happening in the industry. And what ended up happening was a void was created in an industry that had so much potential for greatness. And there were plenty of people who were more than willing to fill those voids because people understand the power of story. We serve a great God, but we also know there's an enemy who understands that there is power in storytelling and telling amazing, beautiful stories, creating art. So faith-based films largely went dark for many, many years. You look back over since the 60s, how many amazing standout faith-based films? Relatively non-existent. That has changed in the past 20 years, which is highly encouraging. You look at the success of like Passion of the Christ, the Bible miniseries, War Room, I Can Only Imagine, God's Not Dead. Those are films that finally made Hollywood realize, okay, there's some money potential here. I think of I Can Only Imagine, made on, I think, a $7 million budget, bringing in 80 plus million at the box office. So you look at the percentage of increase. Studios see those dollar signs, and all of a sudden you see major studios investing in faith-based art. Maybe not for the right reasons, but they're investing in faith-based films. Change is in the air, and faith-based film, I would argue, is in the best position it's ever been in, and for sure in my lifetime. So, as parents, what are some important things? Knowing that, this industry, I've seen a lot of really bad examples of what the industry can produce, what its people promote, and I get that. But the fact is, your children might have extraordinary gifts in the artistic realm that God specifically gave them and planned for them to have since the dawn of time, since eternity past. That's sobering. That is a sobering reality. Huge responsibility. Colossians 3:23 through 24 says, "Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward." You are serving the Lord Christ. Whatever you do, work heartily. So whatever you do would include filmmaking, creating art. You can honor the Lord creating art. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up your child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it." A lot of people would interpret that, train up your child in a disciplinary way. Yes, but it also implies in the way he should go. The emphasis is more on train up your child in their specific lane. You see a gift they've been given, you see a talent, an aspiration, train them up in that way. I've seen some parents do this so very well, including my own. I'll just give my experience with how my parents handled this. So this was late 90s, early 2000s. I was really starting to think to myself, this is what I'm going to do for a living. I'm not going to just do this for fun. I'm going to do this for a living. And my dad was a firefighter, did not have much exposure in this world at all. And I remember for my senior year of high school, he bought me a present to go to a John Williams concert. For those of you who don't know who John Williams is, I know you guys do. John Williams is arguably the most popular film composer of all time. He wrote the music for Star Wars and Indiana Jones, E.T., Superman. Yep, so very, very well known. And he was like my music hero. And my dad knew that. Didn't really know anything about him, but knew that that meant a lot to me. And so at 18 years old, he bought me incredible tickets at the Chicago Symphony Hall, and we went and saw John Williams live in concert. And I remember sitting 10 rows back, middle of the aisle, never forget, and I had tears in my eyes as I listened to the opening piece that he played, the Olympic fanfare. And I remember thinking to myself and having a conversation with the Lord, I'm going to do this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm from Iowa, which is not known for creating art. And I don't know where I'm going to go to school. I don't know how I'm going to accomplish this. But Lord, I think this is what you want me to do. And that was a turning point for me. But I also was interested in acting. So there was an intersection of interest. And I had decided at the end of my senior year, I wanted to move to Hollywood. I wanted to move out to LA. And I had an encouragement from my drama teacher, multiple other people that were saying, Aaron, I think you got talent. You should just go for it. So I'm like, yep, I'm gonna go to LA. I'm gonna wait tables by night and audition by day, and sure enough, I'll be famous in no time. So I remember my dad taking me out to eat, and I know where we were in the restaurant, and he said, Aaron, I think you should hold off. And he said, honestly, I don't think you're ready. I don't think you're prepared to immerse yourself in that world. But I think it's so important that he didn't say it's not in your future, but he did say, I don't think you're ready yet. And it was hard for me to listen to. I remember distinctly the bristles on the back of my neck standing up and thinking, wow, my dad doesn't think I can do this. But pausing, taking a moment, knowing that my dad loved me more than anybody else who was speaking into my life. It's so easy to tell someone, you're so talented, go and do this without any investment in the game. But my parents obviously were invested in who I was and my spiritual development, as well as who I was going to become professionally. So I listened. I went to a one-year Bible college just to get a good foundation, and ended up meeting my wife there, which was a major perk that I never would have had if I had not listened to my parents, who I knew loved me and wanted the best for me. Ended up going there 4 years because I loved it so much. And then just seeing how the Lord has worked. I didn't start composing until I was 24. Didn't start acting until I was 30. I'm 33 now. So just seeing how the Lord wanted me to wait. And so often, he does want us to wait. I don't think my parents had any doubt that eventually I would be doing some form of what I'm doing. But the timing was everything. I'm a way different person now than I was at 18 years old. And I'm so grateful that the Lord had decided that time needed to pass before I was prepared to be doing what I am doing today. So I'm so grateful for the way my parents nurtured that without discouraging my talent, but also knowing me well enough to know, you know what, Aaron, you're not ready. You're not ready. Keep practicing, keep doing what you do, but you're not quite ready. One more did you see how I'm not even moving any of this? I gave all of this great artistic work, history of Hollywood, Christianity's early influence, don't discourage God-given talent. Here we are. Now we're up to speed. Last thing I want to focus on, Mark 16:15. What does that say? Jesus said, "Go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation." Everyone is in desperate need of Christ's love and the good news of the gospel. They need the light that only He can offer. The people who are making films, okay, they are searching for meaning via the stories they're telling. You talk to any filmmaker who's making films for the secular market, they're not making these movies for no reason. They all have something they're trying to drive home to audiences. They're passionate about something, and really they're hungry for the qualities of Christ and of what He can offer. They're just looking in all the wrong places. How then will they call on Him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in Him of whom they have never heard? And how are they to hear without someone preaching? And how are they to preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who preach the good news. The gospel is needed in the entertainment industry. The light of Christians who are faithfully serving the Lord are needed in the dark corners of the world. I think it's so easy to, encourage and promote missionary work to these lands where, there's not really a language that we even have that connection with, or it's just very unreached in general. We strongly encourage those connections to be made and for the light to go to those dark places. But when it comes to the entertainment industry, for some reason, there's this, maybe not them. Maybe that's one little segment of humanity that we shouldn't be going, which is simply not true. The mission field's not just overseas. It's not just impoverished neighborhoods. The mission field is also in the elite of Hollywood. And there are people every day, artists who are struggling and living day to day, desperate to make it, to be famous. And they're just lost in their own heads because they're so desperate for something. They're so desperate for satisfaction and affirmation and approval by somebody. And multiple sets that I have been on in my recent acting career, I am shocked by, number one, how receptive people are to hear your story and to hear what you're, for example, one I was on last year, a lady came up to me and she was just like, how do you decide what roles you'll do? It's like, whoa, okay. And I explained to her, as a Christian and as a married man, where I have my lines, and you could just see on her face, like, whoa, and I asked her, she said, oh, I'd do anything. I would do anything for a role. Okay. And then we were able to have a discussion about how my faith plays a role in how I navigate my career. And there are thousands of people out there who want to have that sort of connection and have that sort of guidance. And if not us, then who? That being said, again, important cautions and caveats. Don't go in blind. Do not go into this industry naive. This is, yes, overwhelmingly can be a dark place to be. You don't have to look very far to see examples of that, okay? Look at headlines, look at famous actors, look at their lives, look at their marriages, look at what they are promoting, what they're worshiping, in essence. There's a lot of godlessness. And that's why I think presentations like this need to be made, because we have to understand that balance of, yes, it's a dangerous place, but it's a place that needs people like us. Make sure your children are grounded before taking the leap. That's what my parents desperately wanted for me. I was not ready. I would have gone to LA, did not have a community, did not have I would not have had a church that I was plugged into. You need a community in this industry, which is why I love this festival and those like it, where we're coming together and reminding one another, we're not alone in this. We have a team. We have people who are on our side, wanting to support us. That is huge. If you do have a child who's away from you and doing film, I would encourage them, plug into a church. Okay? We were never meant to live life alone in that way. Similar, like if you have someone stand on a chair, they give this example a lot. If you are a lone person on a chair and you're surrounded by influence, just one yank from someone is enough to pull you down, because you're all alone trying to stand firm without any sort of protection and influence. You get a group of people and surround yourself with people who will encourage you to make right decisions, who will tell you when you're doing something wrong. Find friends who are willing to really challenge you and your decision making, and encourage you to grow your relationship with the Lord. Surround yourself with solid Christian friends and influences. And lastly, I would encourage you, if you're a parent, this is what I would encourage, and if you are a child who's thinking about pursuing art, check your motivations. Children, why do you want to go into the industry? Is it vanity? Is it pride? Is it just attention? Those kind of things. Those are not good motivations to enter into the career that we're talking about today. Parents, why don't you want your children to go into this career, this industry? Is it because you have a personal vendetta against the industry? Is it just because you want your child to not end up like one of those people, quote unquote? It is so important to recognize calling. And if a calling is there, and it's pretty obvious. I think a lot of times we overcomplicate when someone's like, well, what's the will of the Lord in your life? And people have asked me that. How did you know? How did you know you were destined to be in film? I said, well, to me, it was not a hard thing. The Lord energizes, even when it's not easy. I'm not saying it should, if everything's just gliding right along and your career is skyrocketing, clearly the Lord's favor. No, not at all. But the joy that you experience when doing the things that you were wired to do, so to speak, you cannot, it's hard to explain. And those of you who are doing it, you get it. I get off a film set, I finish writing music for a film. It's unbelievable. And it's one of those things where I'm like, Lord, thank you for putting me on this earth to do this type of work. And so understanding that if that's there, if you know 100% or 95% that this is what you're meant to be doing and what your calling is, do it, and do it heartily for the Lord and not for yourself. And then when you do that, again, your path might not be smooth, but know that you are honoring the Lord in what you're doing, and there's no satisfaction that compares to that. Lastly, commit your ways, your work, your aspirations to the Lord. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. It's easy to lean on our own understanding. And in this culture and in this world of entertainment, you are encouraged to trust your emotions, trust your heart, trust your mind. We know what's inside by nature, okay? The Lord says the heart of man is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. That's our human condition. So if we're going into an industry where we're letting our heart lead rather than trusting the Lord with our pursuits, destined for disaster. But if you are committed to serving the Lord and honoring Him, watch out. And for your kids, be excited for them. You don't know. You have no clue what kind of impact they could have. And you may never know. It may take many, many years. But you can rest in the fact that if they're serving the Lord and they're creating art for His glory, they're living a fulfilled life. Okay? Any questions? I wanted to leave at least 10 minutes for questions. So if you have any, let me know. If not, we will break a little early so you guys can skedaddle. Yes.
I just want to comment and say, thank you for what you're doing here and speaking into people's lives like that is important. And I say this as a comment. As you're talking, I forgot about some of these things. My mom was involved in the music industry years ago, back in the 40s and 50s.
Hmm.
And she was singing on the Arthur Gumphrey show. It would be on the radio.
Yeah.
And even back then, she would tell me later on in life how, probably why she got out, the bad influence, getting to see people do anything to get a position. And I'm thinking, man, that's so important, especially for young kids. I mean, and you see in today in the arts, what people are doing is like insane.
Yeah.
So they need people like you to kind of put the rudder back in position. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's encouraging. Yeah, that's the balance, to always find that balance of understanding the importance of what's being done, that there's value here, but also which I'm going to talk on this tomorrow for the keynote, so I won't tip my hat too early. But it's so important to understand your hierarchy before you get there, before you enter into this, to say, okay, if I'm offered, for example, a gig that I know will compromise what the Lord would have for my life, I'm not going to do it, even if it means my career could take off. If you have that hierarchy in place, you don't have to second guess yourself all the time. That has been absolutely essential for me when I entered into acting, which is, again, more recent than music. Right when I signed on with the talent agency, my wife and I sat down and we said, okay, what will I do? What won't we do? And that has made the decision-making process unbelievably easy. I get a script, I look at it, flip through it, won't do it. That's it. I don't second guess it because I know my wife and I are on the same page. We're making decisions together. Doesn't matter. We're both eyes on the Lord, eyes on one another, and that controls that decision-making process. If you don't have that structure and you don't have that mindset, you'll be bombarded with daily decisions about what should I do, what should I do, what should I do, and it creates turmoil, and that's why you end up making terrible, awful decisions that they recognize later. I have heard three recent news stories of people who were in the most popular shows that are currently trending shows say, I didn't know what I was getting into. I made that decision to be in the show, and they had horrible things happen to them while they were on the show. And they recognized later that I was doing that for fame. I was doing that because it was a smart career move, but not a smart life move. And so I would just encourage you to get that hierarchy in place ASAP, because then your decisions will come way easier. You won't have to second guess them. Any others? Yes?
So how did you get into film composing?
Okay.
My son is interested in that.
Okay, great. the question was, how did I get into film composing? Well, I will cover some of this tomorrow as well, but long and short of it, I knew I loved music early on. I, took piano lessons, and I would sit down at the piano and compose for hours, not writing things down, but I would just sit there and play. I loved the Chronicles of Narnia. My dream has always been to write music for the future Chronicles of Narnia films, but that mindset of creating music has been in my life for a long time, and loved film specifically. I always joke that when I was hanging out with my peers, and they'd ask, well, what kind of music do you buy, or what kind of music do you listen to? And I'm like, well, like soundtracks. And they're like, what are those? It was not popular by any means, but I just knew that that's kind of the direction I was going. And then, do you know Adventures in Odyssey, anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, the composer for that, John Campbell, he's been writing for Adventures in Odyssey for 30 plus years, since its inception. Almost 40 years, 35 years. He was the first one to kind of take me under his wing. I became friends with him through working on an audio project. I wasn't a composer, but I was involved with the project, met him, we became fast friends, and when I started composing, he was the first person to be like, here's the equipment you should buy, here's the direction you should go, here's how to get some experience, those kind of things. I would call him, he was my go-to person. So he was the first one to like get me to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm writing music on a computer and this is crazy. And then I slowly just practiced. And then I started just reaching out to people. And that is a huge part of what this industry is, and being successful in this industry is being unafraid to ask for things. And I reached out to a music supervisor for Walden Media, who produced the Chronicles of Narnia. So he was the music supervisor for Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian. And I reached out to him on LinkedIn and was just like, listen, I write music and I have no idea if I have talent. Like, can you I know you know what good music is. And I said, would you listen to it and just be honest with me? Tell me if I'm barking up the wrong tree. And he's like, nope, I think you've got talent. I would love to stay in touch with you. And I love working with young composers. And so that helped me, he helped get me some opportunities that pivoted into, film and being more connected in that world. So I went out to LA, he set up one-on-one meetings with some composers and some music department heads. So that kind of journey is pretty much across the board how it goes. You clearly have developed a skill set, and then you seek out the people who are doing the type of work you want to do, connect with them, ask them to mentor you. I was shocked how many people are willing to work with people who are, unknown, because they remember being there. They remember being in your position, and they want to help you get to where they are. I met with the composer, never forget, he was John Williams' orchestrator. It's the closest I've gotten to meeting John Williams. And he's 90-some years old, so I better hurry. He's the orchestrator for John Williams, and I went into his studio, and he sat down with me and talked to me for about 45 minutes. And at the very end, I just was like, thank you so much for your time. I know this is, I'm from a kid from Iowa. You don't even know who I am. And he said, listen, every time I hear from a young composer who wants to be doing what I'm doing, I think to myself, what would I want someone to do for my son in a field that he's interested in? If he was an architect and he had the opportunity to meet with one of the top architects, what would I want from that experience? I would want them to take the time to speak with them. He said, that's how I view it when I'm meeting with someone. I know it's someone's son or daughter that wants the best for their kids. And almost across the board, that's the kind of experience I've had when I've just cold emailed or cold called someone. They're pretty willing to help if it's done in the right way. So it is a God thing. Yeah. Definitely. So it starts, I would say, starts with practicing and gifting, getting yourself to a position, putting the work in to get to a position where you feel ready in some way, shape, or form to do the next step. Then it's networking, which this is a great place to do that. But yes, have them talk to me. I'd love that. Anybody? Yes.
I just want to share that my son is a no-name boy from Frankfort, Illinois, and through another Christian lady gave my son Anthony Aaron's name. Anthony did a short little thing, and Aaron didn't want to take money from my son. He did the music for it. So as he has been mentored, he has been a mentor to my son. So thank you.
Thank you. It was fun. He's a good kid. Yes, well, we're out of time. If you do have questions throughout the rest of the time, feel free to, I'll be around. I'll be all around. So, thank you.